everybody, welcome to Salt. We are out and about today, although the rain came when it was not scheduled.
Yeah, there was no rain in the forecast, not for here.
Yeah, no rain, and yet when we looked outside, rain. But yeah, so we came downtown because it kind of slacked off, and I thought maybe it's not raining in Cleburne. Sure enough, it's not raining here, at least not at the moment, and we are in Buffalo Creek City Park. It's one of the few city parks we haven't been to, and yeah, as you can see in the video and pictures earlier, it's not much. It looks really pretty. Like if you can take pictures to make it look really pretty, but it's just downtown Cleburne, in the old section of Cleburne, and I think it was a project they started to try and beautify the downtown area. And they did pretty good, although at some point it seems like they stopped the upkeep. And it's just real small. It runs, there's this little, it's a little bigger than what I call a creek, but the creek, and it looks like it's like a waterway overflow for the city. Goes under a bridge, and a couple of little walkways with some nice, lamps, lights, and
yeah, they have some pretty flowers.
And benches and stuff, yeah. But yeah, at some point it looks like they quit upkeep on it. So anyway, I think they meant to make a little oasis in the middle of downtown, and valiant effort. They got the trees up, they got the sidewalks put in, the benches, but could use a little work. But anyway, thought we'd come downtown and do something on location since it's not such a bad day, and little humid, but not too bad. But this is part of Cleburne, Texas, one of the little towns close to Keene. It's, if you want to do any kind of shopping, Cleburne's your first stop, and then Burleson's a little further away, and that's got more stuff. But yeah, kind of a cool little place. Anyway, here we are. You saw a little bit of Cleburne. And
Brett, I was looking, I was like, oh, I'm not going to talk about Salt this week. What am I going to talk about? And finally I thought, well, maybe there's some sort of story that happened that we can pull something out of. And I thought, well, Brett had his birthday and I had my birthday, and while they were perfectly nice days, I couldn't pull any stories and analogies and stuff out of it. So then I remembered that on Thursday, Brett had an eye appointment. And it was a most interesting eye appointment, it turned out. Usually you go in, well, how would I know? I only ever had one eye appointment with an optometrist in my life. Wow. And that was, I think, just before we moved here, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and my eyes were just fine then, thank you very much. She said I didn't need glasses yet, so I was pretty happy with that. Yeah. And, but yeah, Brett had an eye appointment, and wow, what an appointment.
Yeah, I hadn't had one in a while. I needed to, since I got diabetes, I wanted to get my eyes checked, because all my doctor said, get your eyes checked. Now that you have diabetes, you have to be careful with your eyes. I'm like, oh, okay. So I called and got a diabetes eye check. And it was just a bunch of tests I had never had before. I mean, you go in, sometimes they dilate your eyes, and they do the little puff glaucoma test. But this had all kinds of scans and different things to do. It's like 5 different tests I'd never seen before. Anyway, one of them was a scan, and I was sitting there, and nowadays they got it where you scan and the computer screens are up, and you can see what they just scanned. You can see your eyeball, you can see the stuff they just did, and I wasn't really too concerned. I was just going through the motions, and then I glanced up to see, oh, that's my eyeball, and on the screen next to it, it said ocular melanoma, and referral specialist, and gave a number and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, ocular melanoma, wow, I'm not sure what that is. And I know melanoma can also mean color of your eyes. So I'm trying to tell myself, it's just something about the color of my eyes. It doesn't really mean what I think it means. And so as I was waiting in the office there for the doctor to come, I looked up ocular melanoma, you know, and it's cancer of the eye, and it's like, there's an 80% 5-year survival rate, and there's nothing you can do. And I'm like, I'm freaking out because it was right there on the screen with my, the scan they had just done. And I was trying to tell them, don't panic till the doctor says it, don't panic. And then my screens came up in the waiting room, and there was a thing right in the middle of my eye with these blood vessels coming out. And I thought, oh man, that's it. That's the melanoma, and they've got it up to explain things to me. And I mean, I'm really thinking, how am I going to deal with this? 5 years, and so she came in, we went through the whole thing, and and just like, she's like, yes, so you got great, healthy eyes, everything's, we need to check you. I probably don't need to see you for another year, but, your eyes look great, diabetic, I don't see any kind of, so I was like, that's okay, thank you, but when I had that scan, it said ocular melanoma, and I was sitting here thinking I've got ocular, they said, oh, no, that's a screensaver, it's, one of our providers, and it just comes up and rotates through. Oh, if you see this, call this person. If you see this. And they're like, you should tell people this. Or, why is it up there while you're doing tests, So fear averted. But there for a little bit, I was like, oh my word. Well, get your things in order.
It was kind of interesting that they would put it up at all. Yeah. Because when you look it up, basically 5 people in a million get it.
It's pretty rare.
And not only that, it has no symptoms.
Yeah, and there's no symptoms. You don't see it.
And so I wasn't quite sure why, I don't know, people particularly needed to be aware of it, particularly when it created such a scare,
Oh my gosh.
But, so Brett believed a lie.
Yeah.
And, sometimes we believe a lie. And, if we can recognize the truth and then change our living, that's great. But sometimes, even people who recognize that it's a lie choose not to change. I know I used to go walking with a friend, and we would have some energetic discussions sometimes.
Ask and see if that's a turtle and get a picture of it. There might be a turtle swimming by. Keep going.
She said, sometimes, she says, in the midst of a discussion, she says, I'll recognize that I'm wrong. She says, but I will not give up my point of view during the discussion.
I thought that's hilarious. I know I'm wrong, but I'm not admitting it.
Yeah, I just thought, oh, okay, well, that's different. But or maybe it wasn't different. It was just different than how I would see it and do it, But generally, on the other hand, I like to think that I generally don't argue the point unless I feel as though I'm right.
Yeah.
I suppose most people do feel they're right, but whatever.
I know I'm wrong, but hear me out.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's sort of like sometimes we think it doesn't really matter. I suppose it sort of seems like a small thing at that point in time. I mean, maybe you're discussing poetry or something like that and discover you're wrong about a certain line or something, and that probably doesn't really matter that much, but the at the same time, take for example the 10 virgins, the 5 wise and the 5 unwise, and the 5 wise got more oil, and that was a good thing, right? Because the 5 unwise thought, well, it doesn't really matter. And they did get more oil, and it did make a big difference, obviously, because they didn't get into the party. Mm-hmm. And while the 5 wise virgins with their oil did. And of course, the oil represents the Holy Spirit and such like that. So, yeah. And then there was one more thing that Brett, the eye drops and stuff.
Oh, yeah. As a result. So, yeah, I guess, I don't know if it's getting older or part of the having diabetes, but I learned something interesting I didn't know this about. Like you have tears, you have your tear ducts, and, tears, the salty water, it, clears your eyes, and it keeps your eyes clean and protected. What I didn't realize was that above your eye, there's a gland in it, it secretes oil, and it mixes with the tears, and that's a protective layer for your retina. And so any time you blink, you're not just getting, tear, you're getting this oil. And they mix and they form this protective sheen over your eye, so it protects your retina. And mine was kind of dry. And whatever scale they're using, they don't like anything lower than a 10, and mine was an 8. And so they gave me these goggles, and they have these little gel packs, one that goes in each goggle eye, and you mush it together, and it creates a chemical reaction, and it heats up. And I'm supposed to wear it twice a week for 15 minutes, and it loosens up, it warms up those ducts in the oil, because what she said is that over time the oil is like coconut oil. When you leave it out, it starts to get solid, and this will warm it up and liquefy it, and so it'll act like it's supposed to act. So I have to do that twice a week now, plus some eye drops, but I didn't know that. I'd always knew you had tears and you're blinking it, but I didn't know about it mixes with this oil.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, especially since once again we can compare the oil to the Holy Spirit, and like the oil, it protects the eyes, and it's not just like right now. It becomes a long-term thing, because if you didn't do that, now your eyes sight or whatever is going to deteriorate more quickly than if you don't do that.
Yeah, I would get these sharp pains, and I didn't know where they were coming from. In the back of my eye, and it's like, oh, ow, like what is that? Since I got diabetes, like, wow. And that's what she explained. She says, well, that's what you're feeling. It's like those times when you don't have the oil on your eye and you're at somebody, it gets hit and your retina hurts. That's where the pain's coming from.
Oh yeah. And so basically, the oil acts as a protectant for the eyes and such. The shield of faith acts as a protectant for us, for our spiritual lives, as also. And unless we have that shield of faith, then we lose our spiritual eyesight. Because faith is not only belief in God, but also, faith without works is dead. So faith lives out the truth of God. And
you could almost, in a different way, you could say the oil and the water is like faith and works. And they work together to protect your eye. And without one, it doesn't work.
Brett, the great commercial writer.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyways, we had a visitor to our Sabbath school. An older couple came in, and they were actually from Finland. She's a retired pastor over there, but currently has a lot of retired pastors do. He was working part-time as a church pastor.
Kind of looking after our
Finland.
church. Yeah.
And at the end of Sabbath school, a lady asked him, so I guess Finland borders Russia. And so she asked him, how are the people in Finland doing? Are they worried about that Russia may invade them at some point in time?
Well, because Russia's started talking about, re-looking at the borders and with Finland.
Okay.
And everything. So there's all like, now they're going to do to us what they did to Ukraine and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
So in theory, there should be a lot of nervousness, like.
Yeah, but he said, and of course he lives there, he said that it doesn't really seem to make a difference because life is still currently as usual, and there's nothing different. He said it reminds him somewhat of, the time before the flood came with Noah. Noah preached, and yet the people, look, everything is fine, and it's going to continue to be fine because it's always been fine. And then turns out it wasn't. But I thought that was kind of interesting. He did say, though, that within the war zone in Ukraine, that there has been a big spiritual revival. And I thought that was interesting because, they recognize their need of protection. And there's something more than just physical protection. They recognize that they also need spiritual protection, and because of the situation that they are in. But
well, it's interesting that the church grows exponentially when it's under persecution or when times are hard, and when times are not hard and everything's good, the church doesn't grow and it actually, loses members, and it doesn't thrive as much. The church seems to thrive in hard times and persecution, like in Ukraine versus Finland.
Yeah.
It's has a way more of focusing life and showing what's really important and what the real important needs are.
Yeah, and it reminds me of, it's probably been at least a year ago. I was sitting in the car, probably waiting on Brett and for something, and I heard the story that had happened in the Ukraine, and apparently Russia had invaded this small town, and the soldiers were looking for a place to spend the night, and it was a farmhouse, I guess, and they went into it and told the guy they were going to spend the night there, and they discovered, what was he going to do? Say no? He couldn't, So he was a bit worried about the situation because he'd heard other stories and such that didn't end so well. And so, unfortunately, they did find his stash of alcohol. They got drunk, and then they went ahead and they tied him up and blindfolded him.
Yeah.
And they put him at the kitchen table in the kitchen, of course, and sat him down there. And it was directly across from the kitchen door. And they went out, and he could hear them talking. And he knew that they were going to shoot him, And so he said all of a sudden, wait. He said he wasn't particularly a Christian, hadn't really thought that much about God, didn't even really know if he existed or not. But, he wasn't particularly an atheist either. Mm-hmm. So he said, you know what, God, if you exist, I need your help. And he said all of a sudden they started shooting. Just shooting and shooting through the kitchen door. And he's shocked because he's sitting there and not a single bullet hits him.
Wow.
And then eventually the shooting stops, and they open the kitchen door and they walk in. And he said the looks on their faces were just like, oh my goodness, we can't believe this guy is alive. He should have been dead. And so they did untie him and such. I'm sure they even recognized that clearly there was something involved that was bigger than they were. And I forget if he may have left for the night and decided that he didn't need to stay there. But all the same, he's like, I recognized that this God thing was something I needed to pay more attention to and probably find out more about God. And just thought that was a really interesting story.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone who recognized, he came really close, right? He was at death's door, should have been dead. But he asked God for help, and God was there for him. And not only was it a physical saving, but hopefully it was also a spiritual saving for him. A step in that direction.
Yeah, neat. Heard that. Well, the sun came out.
Yes, now it's getting warm. Okay, time to go.
Blue skies and the sunshine, and turns out it's going to be a decent day. I guess the rain was just a small, short, little, passing thing instead of the beautiful, glorious day we were promised.
For us.
Yeah.
But Dallas-Fort Worth got some pretty good rain and thunder and whatever up there looked like. They had 3 weather alerts.
Wow. So yeah, if you heard some of the revving engines and music, we're right by the 4-lane road that goes into town.
Yeah.
I know you can't see it. It looks like we're in the middle of a park and but we're right next to the road. Because that's where the park is, right in the middle of downtown. So anyway. All right, well, we'll see if we can find some other parks we haven't been to that are, worthy of visiting and doing some salt at. Most of the parks around here, pretty much, a couple of pieces of playground equipment and a few benches, and that's it. But yeah, now that it's summer, nicer, we'll try and get out and do some more. So hope you had a good Sabbath, and we'll be here next week, and you have a great rest of your Sabbath, and we'll see you next time.